Thank you very much. I am very happy to be here today, although I must say that it is very frustrating and even dangerous sometimes to talk about creativity, because people have so many preconceptions about creativity. For example, some months ago, I was talking to a bunch of teachers about creativity, and I was telling them how we could foster creativity in schools, for example. I was telling about my own work. And then one male teacher raises the hand, stands up, and basically was angry at me. He was saying, "We have enough of these street artists and bad singers. What we need are electricians and software engineers." And I said, I agree. I agree that we need more electricians and software engineers. However, we want our electricians and software engineers also to be creative. And not in the sense that, you go to your software developer with a task, and in return you get a poem. Not in that sense creative. We want them to be creative in the sense that when they have a task, they are able to come up with a new solution. They are able to come up with something that has value and that is novel. And that is creativity. So here we already see two very big preconceptions people have about creativity. The first is that creativity is something that artists do. No, it's not. We here in the Institute do creativity. Software engineers need creativity. Scientists need creativity. Every one of us can be creative. And the second preconception is that creativity is something that is completely original, something completely different from what others have done. No. Creativity, as for example defined also by many researchers, is something that is novel, but at the same time has utility or is appropriate to the problem. So something that is completely different is not creativity in that sense. And I think it's very useful to think about creativity like that, because then we can realize what we can actually do to be more creative, or to help our students be more creative, or to help our children to be more creative. And that's why I called it the kind of the recipe of creativity, of what can we actually do about it. And we can talk or discuss the ingredients of creativity. And when we take into account that creativity has to be novel, while being appropriate, then we already see the first ingredient, which is not actually so much discussed when people talk about creativity, and that is that in order to be creative, you need to know the works of other people. You need to know what has been done on your field. If you're a scientist, you need to know the papers of other scientists working on that field. Only then you can assess what is actually novel and at the same time appropriate. And the same also goes about artists, for example. Yes, we think that art is something that you do something completely different, but that's not how artists usually work. Great artists are also avid studiers of art. They know very well what other people have done. Okay. Most of us consider Picasso to be a great original who did a lot of very original stuff, but if you study his pieces, then you see that often he gives references to works of other artists. He used certain elements that other artists have used. He had a collection of different pieces of art that he actually used also for his paintings, right? Or similarly, if you listen to Brahms, you will find some melodical references to Beethoven, for example. This is done on purpose. It's not stealing, it's the same we do in science. We show that we know these other works, and we build upon that. So you cannot be really creative without actually knowing the work that is done on your field of creativity. But the second ingredient is that, of course, if you simply study what others have done, then you can be a historian or I don't know. But if you want to be really creative, then you need to have this wish to actually do something novel, to go beyond that what other people have done. This is the hard step. This is sometimes too hard, but I think the first kind of important point is that we want to tell that to our students and also to our children and to ourselves that, we need to strive towards something that is novel. We shouldn't be simply reading what others have done, simply doing one method and putting it together with something other, but we should strive towards doing something that's truly creative. However, still keep in mind that you also need the first ingredient. You cannot simply strive towards something that's novel without actually knowing the field. And here's a great example that I know about it. It comes from the Institute of Max Planck Institute of Brain Research, where I was a PhD student and Professor Raul Vicente was a postdoc. There we had a group leader who he liked to brag about how he's going to change neuroscience and psychology. And basically one of his famous, or I would say infamous sentences was, "I don't read papers, I write them." And then, in the end, he wrote his paper. I mean, I was just a PhD student, so I was really excited, about this breakthrough work. And I was asking, "Yeah, can you show me the paper?" Yeah. And then he sent it to me. I couldn't relate at all. And at that moment, I thought that either I'm very stupid or this paper actually is bad. Because he hadn't read the other papers. So he was writing about something that is in his brain, something very important, but it didn't relate to what other people were actually asking. It didn't relate to what other people on the field were doing. So I gave him a bit of negative feedback, and he told me basically, "You're just a stupid PhD student." But time has shown kind of that either this paper will be kind of discovered in some decades after publication, or in the end, he missed out on the first ingredient. And I think he did. So I'm here, I study and develop I study artificial intelligence, and we develop new artificial intelligence algorithms. But I'm very interested in how these things also work in our brain. And I would love to tell you that we know how creativity works in our brain, but we don't. But I think the general idea about creativity is what happens is that when you you study the field, you collect these pieces of knowledge, and then you start combining them. You start transforming these pieces of knowledge, trying to put them together in a novel way. So that is what we have discussed up until now. However, if you think about it like that there are these pieces of knowledge that you need to transform, then you realize that the third ingredient of creativity is that you want to have good pieces of knowledge, or perhaps we should even say special pieces of knowledge. If you only know these things that everybody on the field knows, everybody knows these things, well, it's very hard to be creative because every one of these people could do the same thing. So you want to have some special pieces of knowledge, let's call them golden nuggets, right? Nuggets of knowledge in the sense that you have something that other people don't, some pieces of knowledge. Then you're in a much better position to do something creative when you are putting them together. So where can you get these kinds of pieces of knowledge? So one way is to actually read books that other people don't, or study fields that other people don't. Again, when artists are working or something, they might also get inspiration or an idea from a completely different field. The same goes about science. But I think one very important way of actually obtaining the pieces of knowledge is by talking to people, by talking to different people. And I think this is why our Delta building is a very nice place, right? Because we have people doing business, we have companies here, we have different research institutes, and even within our own Institute of Computer Science, we have very different research groups. Sometimes we think that these people in the other research group, they are kind of strange or we cannot relate to them. But what I'm telling to you is that sometimes you need to talk to these strange people, okay? And for example, today we have the Creativity Day with these breaks for snacks, and go talk to these other people, share your ideas, and try to obtain or extract some pieces of knowledge from their brain. Not through surgery, okay? Not through surgery, but by talking to them. I know this is sometimes harder than surgery, but you know, this is what we should do. One reason why we don't talk, or why we don't like to share our ideas, or why we don't like to go to this strange person and talk about our own stuff is that, you know, disagreements happen. They might say something we don't like. They might give us negative feedback. This creates tension, and we kind of don't like it. But what I'm telling to you now is that the fourth and important ingredient of creativity is that you have to embrace frustration and tension. And it's another preconception that, you know, creativity is something that, you know, happens like, oh, you dance through the life and you're so creative. No, no, no. True creativity needs that you actually struggle and you try to do something that other people haven't done. It's hard. So you are here, you want to get there, but nobody has done it before, so you don't know actually how to do it. That's why creativity is always hard. But what I'm telling to you is we should not run away from it, we should embrace it. That if it is relevant to our problem, it is relevant to what we want to achieve, then we have to go and confront this frustration and confront this struggle. And I mean, artists also show us the way. I mean, our beloved composer Arvo Pärt had his years of crisis in the 1960s, and he writes about this crisis that these were not kind of conscious years of study, but, and this is his quote, these were life and death agonizing inner conflict, right? And I'm not saying to you that all of you should have now life and death agonizing inner conflict. No, but I'm saying that, you know, some struggle, some frustration is a part of creativity. You cannot get around it, okay? And part of this struggle comes from the fact that that creativity is iterative. And this is, I think, when I'm counting right, it's the fifth ingredient in my list. And this is something that Jaak already also mentioned, that, you know, when you create this concept of delta, it's not that somebody comes up with it and it's done. Rather, there will be a process of going back and forth, discussing different types of ideas, and iteratively trying to improve on the idea you already have. The best example I know of this is the inventor James Dyson, who now is one of the wealthiest people in Great Britain. However, he is wealthy because he's the inventor of the Dyson vacuum cleaner. However, what you might not know is that it took him 15 years to develop this kind of vacuum cleaner. And he has nicely documented that he did more than 5,000 prototypes over these 15 years. So this was a struggle where they didn't have a lot of money, it wasn't really working, but in the end, I would say that it's all good for him, right? And this is the main point is that creativity is iterative, and we need to embrace it that, when we are writing a paper, when we are doing art, it shouldn't be like that, you write the paper and, oh, it's amazing, the world, please crown me, right? But rather, you should go back, try to figure out how you can improve it. You should go and give that draft, for example, of the paper to other people to comment upon, and then iterate. And this is why also creativity is sometimes frustrating, because when you have, for example, I remember it being a PhD student myself, that, I wrote this amazing paper, and then it comes back, everything is red from my supervisor. And I was angry, but now with my own PhD students, I try to already explain it before we get into writing, that, this is what will happen. We will do it in an iterative fashion, that we are all prepared for it. Now, so I have discussed that creativity can be a struggle, it can be frustrating, but importantly, I'm not telling you that, it should be all a struggle, it should be every day a struggle, it should be only a struggle. No, when we study creativity and we study how new ideas come, then we see that actually to come up with a new idea, the big aha, you shouldn't be in a state of frustration and tension, but rather you should be in a state of relaxation, in a state where you are open. And this is an idea that actually has a very long history. You might have heard of Archimedes, and that he got an idea when he was stepping into a hot tub. We don't know if that story is true, but there's another story that we are pretty much where we are pretty sure that this is indeed true. It comes from the French mathematician Henri Poincare, and he was someone who was very interested in creativity. So just to give a bit of context, he lived in the end of 19th century, in the beginning of the 20th century. And to me, he, a mathematician, was actually the first who actually came up with a solid theory of how creativity works. Because he had observed himself, and he made exactly these points that I have made, that you have to work hard, you have to try to get the pieces, you have to try to solve a problem. But what he saw in many cases in his own life is that the solutions, they actually come when you're not working. So the most famous example of this is when he was actually on a vacation, and he writes that, right at the moment when I was stepping on the bus, an idea came to me. And of course, well, he couldn't check it immediately because he was on a bus with his friends, right? But what he said is that he felt this certainty that this is a good idea, and when he then later validated it, then he figured it out that it was a good idea. And the point is that this example showed that, good ideas come out of the brain when you actually are relaxing, seemingly not working at all. And research really has supported this, that these aha moments happen when you relax, you are not doing anything, you basically open up to these very different ideas and combinations of ideas. We study it also in our lab, so if you're interested in these kinds of moments, or you would like to know how to kind of facilitate them, then please come and stop by. So the aha moments, and this is then the sixth ingredient that we kind of, you need to have these moments of relaxation. You need to have these moments where you take time off. But just, again, keep in mind the other 5 steps also, right? So you shouldn't be only relaxing, only in the hot tub, only taking showers and, having a vacation, waiting for your good idea. It doesn't happen like that. First, you need to work hard. You need to try to get something novel. You need to know the stuff that other people have done. And then, perhaps, you can come up with this good idea. And of course, the good idea itself is not a solution. It is rather this kind of a high point where you have something, and then you go again into this iterative loop, into this never-ending iterative loop. So, today I have told you about the 6 ingredients of creativity. There might be some more we can discuss about that, but the point is to give this kind of recipe. And any one of you who has tried to follow a complex recipe of a food knows that, having a recipe is not enough. The fact that you have the recipe does not mean that you will have a great dinner, right? Or that your partner will be happy. No, it doesn't. Because you actually need to follow these things, It's easy to talk about iterating. It's easy to talk that you need to know the field, but then you actually have to go and read papers, or you need to go and iterate your code, and that is hard. But I shared this recipe with the goal that, you at least have heard of these ingredients. Then you can at least try, again, as with the dinner. The first time it doesn't work, then you go back and see, okay, what am I missing? What points of the recipe were still not so optimal? So the point of giving a recipe is that you know that there is a way. And I think this is a knowledge we want to share with our students, with our friends, and also with our children. And perhaps, the really minimal outcome of this talk is that now you know what we mean when we say that, electricians or software engineers should also be creative. So I hope that is solved, but I realize that you might have other types of angry questions. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to some questions.
Do you have some questions?
Angry question.
Angry. Just a moment.
A warm-up question. A warm-up.
There is a famous saying by Einstein that imagination is more important than knowledge. How would you put this into the context of your talk? Or wasn't Einstein a bit one-sided or disbalanced?
Yeah, I think Einstein had a lot of great quotes, but he didn't act, of course, according to his quotes, in the sense that he, of course, had amazing knowledge of his field. And, he had also very good knowledge of mathematics. And he had very good knowledge of actually engineering solutions, because his father and his family were in engineering. And on top of that, he was on the patent office, right, looking at inventions. So actually, he had a lot of pieces of knowledge that he didn't, at least in this quote, he didn't value enough. Having said that, of course, for creativity and for Einstein's creativity, it's important not to simply have those pieces, but to actually try to put these things together. And that is why, in the end, we value Einstein and why he was so successful. But thanks for this great quote.
Any more questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, I hope you will have a very angry question. You were on your phone all the time, so.
Yeah, I was writing down questions.
All right.
So I could do more, but so I will focus on the most angry one.
Yeah.
So you talked a lot about struggle, and what made me angry was that you weren't talking about failure.
Failure.
Yeah. So, and as an educator who likes to see creativity in students, I think we are not giving enough room for failure, and I think failure is a very important ingredient. You might have covered that with your struggle, so I would like you to put these two concepts into.
Yes. But it's a very important point, and I think indeed we also here in Delta we should tell to our students and prepare them that failure is part of the game. We should tell about our own failures. Come on, we all have them, right? Well, maybe some not, but certainly many of us. And indeed, I completely agree that this could have been also the seventh component. Interestingly, for example, when James Dyson, the example I brought under iterations, he talks about his 15 years, then he says that we have to teach students failure because for 15 years I was failing until I made it, right? So indeed, I think we should help students also in our school system to realize that a bad grade is not something that's fundamentally bad, but it's a chance to actually improve and to be better. We should tell that to our children, and we ourselves also should be ready that creativity takes a lot of failing. So thanks for that comment. Yeah.
I think you can even enjoy failure.
Yeah. I mean, embrace it, that it's part of it. Yeah, and I think Thomas Alva Edison was the one who said that I haven't failed, I have simply found 10,000 ways that do not work. Yeah, so it's a matter of perspective indeed.
Any more questions? Audience, you have some questions? I'm very...
you will have more, as I understand. I think you can ask more then.
I also would like to put the time perspective somewhere in this. So how much, so our students I've just seen in the pandemic were just all burning out. And so I don't know if there's a study showing that their performance was less or we gave better grades or so in this time, but I didn't have the feeling that we opened up space for them to be creative. We did the opposite. We kind of, more work, work harder, and we just see them welting, and I think I've never had so bad thesis with so little creativity coming in than now.
Yeah. And I think this is something, I will even give a more general answer. That when we take this kind of an approach to creativity, that yes, it is about hard work, yes, it is about failure, but good ideas often come actually when you're taking time off, relaxing, then we should also tell that to our students, that, this is the recipe. You shouldn't be all the time trying to do this experiment or writing code. You should also take time off when you're feeling that you're kind of too stuck, because a good solution might come actually when you're talking to another person, you are playing a game there in our Delta rooms or whatever, you're doing something different. And when I tell this to, for example, school children or to headmasters, then I also say that, in school we also shouldn't be trying to, put more and more content in to raise the PISA scores, right? But rather, we should teach the children that, sometimes you need to take time off. Sometimes taking time off is good, and research shows, as I briefly mentioned, that, sometimes the most productive ideas come when seemingly we are not doing any productive work, but we are simply there relaxing. So I see my time also ticking down here, so I take again this opportunity to thank you, and thanks for the great questions also. Have a great Creativity Day.